Okay, welcome everyone. So we're here for the very first webinar of the year for Hire. I hope everyone had a great holiday break and New Year, feeling invigorated and refreshed after a pretty tough year last year, I think, for most people in TA. I'm Phil Blades. I'm the founder of Hire and Talentful and Talentverse, and I'm your host today. So personally, I was a head of talent in early stage startups before founding Talentful, which we believe is the world's leading embedded talent consultancy almost 10 years ago. We now support companies like Google, Microsoft, and Atlassian to reach their hiring goals. So do you need to hire stellar people with a focus on diversity? Or maybe you need to hire top tier talent, but your company can't afford to compete with the experienced hires with big tech companies? Maybe earlier careers or campus recruitment is the key to reaching those goals. So we're kicking off the 2024 season of webinars with an important topic, and that's around campus recruiting. So it's a strategic way of bringing exceptional talent into an organization that sometimes is actually overlooked by companies. And we've got two amazing experts to take us on this learning journey. So first of all, we have Brittany, Head of People and Culture at Her Campus Media, and previously spent 5 years at L'Oreal. So maybe Brittany, if you could give us a little introduction to you.
Sure. Yeah. So I come with about a decade of recruitment experience, which 5.5 were at L'Oreal. I recruited across pretty much every function on the experience side. And then in the more recent years, I moved in to focus on university relations, strategy, and leading the early careers team. And then recently I moved into a new role where I'm overseeing all of our people and really focused on more of the retention and recruitment side of emerging talent and Gen Z.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And then we have Sebastian, who's Senior Manager of International Recruiting at Rivian, which is an electric car company, previously worked at Uber. So please, could you introduce yourself, Sebastian?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Phil, and thank you, Breed, as well. So Sebastian, as Phil said, and I'm currently working as an international talent manager at Rivian. I lead full-time recruiting teams, but also like early career talent across all our markets in Europe, mainly. Before that, at Uber, I had the opportunity to create the early career programs for EMEA as a region and Latin America. And I'm super excited today to share a little bit more about my experience and how it can help you to build early career talent for your companies.
Awesome. I've got to admit that in my career as a TA leader, I did quite limited, certainly campus recruiting, but also quite infrequent early careers hiring as well. So during the process of setting up this webinar, it's been incredibly enlightening and also very interesting for me as well. So if nothing else, you've taught me loads, so thank you both. But hopefully all the audience feel the same way by the end of this webinar as well. So we've really aimed this webinar at people maybe starting their journey towards early careers hiring or looking to hone a sort of an early-ish stage initiative with hopefully some practical takeaways for you as well. So as always with webinars on Hire, please do ask questions, comment on LinkedIn. We can see those questions. It does take a little bit of a delay to come through from LinkedIn, but we can see them fairly live and we'll try and answer any questions and bring them through as we go through really. So let's get on with the webinar then. So I guess the first thing to talk about really is so campus recruitment. I mean, maybe it'd be interesting to just talk about what is campus recruitment really, and I suppose why would a company? I think, well, what I would say is if you're a big established company, I think it's probably fairly ingrained that you hire early careers people. But if you're maybe a scaling business, why would you want to get involved in this? What kind of things can it empower within your business? And maybe Britt, if you want to take the first one.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm currently at a smaller company. So L'Oreal was around 85,000. So that was obviously a much larger scale. So where I'm currently at is under 100 employees. And so to focus on early talent, early careers, Gen Z, whatever you want to call it, is really important to the future of the company. I think there's two things to highlight. When you build that early talent, you build longevity of talent and can also help kind of create skills for the future that you need for your business. So a lot of companies really have niche needs right now across digital or marketing, supply chain, engineering, whatever you might have. Where I'm currently at, the niche is really focused more on the marketing and digital side. So when we want to invest in that early careers, it's really about, again, the longevity of bringing in that early talent to develop them for long term. So I think that's really a goal of any company, especially small, to think when you're investing the time and money in this effort to build up early career programs, you're doing it not just for short term, but really that long-term impact for the team. So I think that's really important to keep in mind, for any business, especially a smaller size business as well.
Anything you'd add there, Sebastian?
I think completely relate to that point that Brit brought up. I would say also diversity in many aspects, right? When you're bringing this early career talent to the company, even if it is scale up, it's a bet to have diverse teams. And I'm not only talking about gender diversity or other type of diversity. It can be also that way of thinking, right? When we are adding Gen Z, they are closer and they are part of our customer population, in majority of the companies and the products that we're selling. So adding the right amount of young talent to the teams is actually an investment also into your product. So I think it's another way of selling why campus recruiting is important from a diversity of thinking perspective, but also increasing diversity in general into your organizations.
Yeah, brilliant. I think we talked a little bit yesterday about early careers being an investment, but I suppose in the time, certainly in technology industry at the moment, many companies are looking quite short term, I suppose, really. So are there any tips? So maybe if we've got talent leaders here on the audience who want to invest in this and they really believe in what you're saying, as they should, but maybe company leaders are thinking, well, I only want to really focus on the next 6 months. Are there any tips on how you might articulate that conversation with C-suite as to why they should do it right now?
Yeah, I can go first on this one. So one of the strategies that I follow when we're creating a new early career program, internship programs, co-ops, etc. The thing is the affordability of the talent. And again, when we think about investment, I do not want to confuse internships or students as cheap labor. We really need to pay them the right amount for them to be in a healthy space, for them to be able to dedicate their time to work. But more when we are identifying top talent, we are looking always into the big four, for instance, those are proven talent, but an early company or a company that is scaling probably is not the best employer branded. So when you go to a master program where they have dedicated classes, dedicated topics, where they have brilliant students with brilliant access to tools, you can afford those much more. There's one component that I mentioned yesterday that is obviously having that entrepreneurship mindset that help them, be uncomfortable with, the unknown and the uncertainty. But at the same time, you can afford those people, make them grow into your organization, nurture that talent, and that could be a good selling point to tell your business leader, for instance, on why it's important for you to bring that talent into the organization.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, Sebastian. And just to add to that, one other kind of applicable experience that I went through in my past was and I know, Sebastian, you mentioned about the employer brand. That was a piece that I leaned into, that is an immediate impact on your business, is that employer brand. So, you might not see or hear about it right away, but it's there. And that reputation with students is so profound that if you, again, take the time and effort to put into these programs, then that renders a really strong reputation on the market. In the US, we have, and I think worldwide, there's, Universums, there's a lot of market data out there to show you, hey, this is how your brand is showing up on the market. And I think that's very valuable then to communicate that back to your business stakeholders to say, hey, we're at this level, we need to increase. So this is why we do need to invest in these early careers for reputation and employer branding.
Mm-hmm. Makes total sense. Okay, cool. And so let's just say, company agrees, the sort of logistics internally has been agreed on how we're going to train people, how we're going to bring them through. What are the practical steps when you're thinking about executing for the first time a campus recruiting program, let's say? Maybe let's focus it in on technology type roles. So it could be data, it could be software engineering, whatever it might be. How do we get started? What's sort of day one when you're writing things down on a blank piece of paper?
I think you need to focus on quality, right? To make sure that when you're kicking off a program, you're gonna have a big reach. The majority of the time, students have big classes. So like you spend with them 2 months in the company, they go back and they have a class full of like 100 students, and there's a lot of math of word. So like word of mouth, sorry. So you really need to make sure that the first year that you're building a program, that you focus on quality. Take less, but better, right? What I mean by this is make sure that you have a good ratio on your company, that there is a good mentor, people that I think, Brit, you mentioned yesterday, those are alumni networks that like can help and they know the programs from inside out, that can host the students and being their mentors and coaches inside the organization, to make sure that that experience that they are gonna like go through during the time that they are a company is the best way possible. It's not about like only compensation. It's about the meaningful projects. It's about meaningful deliverables and making them part of the organization and make them experience like super valuable. I think that is one of the top tips that I will follow, that focus on quality, and that will give you much more into a long-term investment on that program.
Yeah, I love that. And just going back to my experience, I remember sitting kind of with a whiteboard thinking, what is our strategy? We really had to start over when I took on this role at L'Oreal. And the two things that I really had to do was really, one, focus on what does good look like? So really understanding your KPIs, what is the data, and why? Because if you're just kind of throwing programs or internships out there without a reason or a measurement, then it's, where's your intentions there? So I had to get very clear on where I was going first. And then the second piece of advice I have is similar to what Sebastian said, just lean into help and other individuals at your company. So we might get into this in the discussion, but just, a lot of campus recruitment teams are very small and nimble. It's sometimes one TA person, or maybe it's a couple. But I would also encourage you to get started, ask for help, lean into other people either on the team, or we leaned into a lot of alumni that were at the company as well. And I do think that is essential to start, because otherwise it feels very overwhelming.
Yeah. I think picking up on the alumni point, and so how do you actually get alumni interested in helping, essentially, if they've left the company already? Like what are the sort of practical things that you can do there?
A lot of people are really interested to go back to their alumni because, if you think about it, university meant so much to so many of us. Yeah. And so when I was building our ambassador program, really it was just about giving people more of a purpose. So think about it. A lot of these alumni at your company, they're likely in other functions. They're not in TA. And so when I was going to people in marketing or sales or supply chain to say, hey, do you want to go speak at your alumni? Do you want to engage in several events? They are really excited, actually, because it's more of a passion project for them versus doing this every day. So they're actually really excited about it. And it's only involving those who are excited about it and not that you're forcing to do. But it's actually surprising how many people, again, when you say, do you want to go help out at universities? A lot of people are like, yes, sign me up. So but again, leaning into the people that want to do it is helpful.
100%. Nothing to add there.
Okay, cool. So let's say, so I think one of the things we talked about yesterday was about, particularly if you look at the US, there's an overwhelming number of universities or colleges to go after. And, it's important that you really think about what you're trying to achieve, as in to create the plan. Let's say that there's a certain demographic or there's a certain type of university that you're trying to target, but you don't have any alumni there. How might you go about, reaching out and contacting them and getting a successful result?
Yeah. I mean, Sebastian, actually, you had a good answer yesterday.
I can go. I think one of the, and I mentioned yesterday, for us, it's really important that you see this as like a three-party relationship of like we are three shareholders on taking a win from the relationship. One is us as a company. Then there's the students that are really important. And there's the university, which is the university piece sometimes we missed. And they are super hungry to be involved. They need help because they need students to be, practical. They need to be like, they want to increase their level of employability. So they are hungry for you to take a call and interact with them. So usually the route that I take is like call a professor that is interested or is doing research in one of the topics or one of the areas that the business is interested to open an internship program or hire in some sort of like a scale. Have a conversation with them. In that relationship, he's going to come up with you with like some topics or some things that he needs. It can be, they need a data set, they need a PhD research topic, they need some information about the culture of the company to do some sort of reporting inside their class. And that is so meaningful for them because it's practical information that the students can relate to if they want to like get hired by X or Y company. Once you open that door, you don't need to do a big partnership with the university. You don't need to pay massive amount of money because the first years that we are opening a campus recruiting program, you would not have that money and no one would approve that, the majority of the cases. But it's a good way to give value back to the university and make them a winning part of that shareholder relationship. After that, like once you have given that, you will have access to the best students, either in a form of hackathon, some sort of competition, like be a lecturer in that university or in that program. And that really opens doors to you to have access to that new university, that specific class, or those set of students. So for me, I've been really lucky to always like had that call and have amazing replies and giving them some sort of like information that is relevant to them. And I would have access to the best students always.
Mm-hmm. Do you think you have to, I mean, this was a bit that I thought was something that I really didn't understand anything about. I mean, in my very limited understanding of doing this stuff, I was sending out cold emails to professors without any, real value to them. And therefore, obviously, I was getting ghosted because at the top universities and the top courses, there's lots of recruiters out there trying to hire these people.
Yeah.
I think, do you have to kind of build this relationship? Do you think that it's sort of like every year you have to kind of go back and almost offer the same value, or, or can you sort of, is it kind of one and then you build the relationship and then that's kind of it? Like what happens?
Personally, I'm like a bit interested in what they do. So like I do present a lot of interest in them. I want to be part of like that community. So always the feedback from my side is like, make us part of the community, the community, make us part of like, if you have a doubt about the curriculum, like we can tell you what are the coding languages that we're using in the company, or what are the marketing softwares that we are using in the company, and what is going to be the future by one of our leaders. They appreciate that, so like they can add that to the curriculum. So I think that is the first part. The second part, they've been frustrated in the past years. Like obviously there's a top league of universities, but the others, usually professors are not the best paid of all the professions out there. And they also care a lot about the research topics that they are working on. That is the live project, right? So you need to make sure that like those students, you don't steal them as well. The ones that like they already presented like some willingness to do a PhD, some willingness to become a professor. You need to always make sure that like you are drawing the lines with them for them not to feel attacked. Because the moment that you are invading, you can always, as a company, pay more money than they would ever pay in an education system, just because it's the reality of the job. So you need to always share and always like make sure that like you are coming on a collaborative approach more than like saying, hey, I'm X company and I want to take the 10% of your class. They will never like that, and they will never collaborate with you in the majority of the cases.
Yeah, nothing to add. I mean, he pretty much, kind of said a lot of what I would add.
Yeah, we talked a little bit yesterday about sort of paying for access, which is something that I didn't really realize was a big thing. Maybe because a lot of my experience is European focused, and we were talking about particularly the US system. Is paying for access ever worth it? Do you think? Have you ever seen that be successful and make get ROI?
It's a good question. I think it depends on the school, but I'll give a specific example where there is ROI when it is a very targeted partnership. So there's kind of two ends of the spectrum. You can donate a decently large amount of money, say $50,000, and you're just going to get a buy-in to be part of the general programs. They might give you opportunities for, you can come to a career fair, you can come to an event, and you can host one other thing. But it's very general. that typically we don't necessarily see an ROI from. Now, on the flip side of that, when you take that same $50,000 and you put it toward a specific part of the business, so we did this actually in our data science department at L'Oreal, and we specifically partnered up with a very small business group, utilized that partnership very intentionally. And so what we did was we brought specific students from a university in New York on site, and they would actually do a lot of mentorship work. They got a lot out of it. We learned a lot from the students because we were learning about what they're learning in school and how to apply it to our business. That data science is changing very quickly. And then we had opportunities for speaking and other events that we wouldn't necessarily have gotten. So I would say if you're going to put a large or small amount of money into a partnership, make sure it is very specific to a part of the business that's going to render those results versus just like a general, again, greater donation at a larger university.
Yeah, I can be a bit more controversial, so I don't know like whose companies are in there, but I'm gonna name drop. So if you're Amazon and you're taking like 30% of every MBA class of Ivy Leagues, then it's worth it. Like they pay millions out there because they hire massively. So then yes, if you have only 50K and you need to be smart about like how you spend those 30Ks, really like follow the approach like the British share, but also like be intentional of your approach, right? Like all those top universities are gonna have a lot of people poaching at them, trying to get the best talent. Be creative. Like there's top students in every single university out there. There's the first of the class in every single class, right? Also like take the opportunity to like those underrepresented minority groups is now super trendy and to create these groups in the universities. Make sure that you're intentional about your recruiting. Like you have it out there, go there, partner with them, like make yourself a company that can, like be there to support those underrepresented group in one way or another, to make sure that like of all that hired, of all that like big reach, you are taking the lead instead of like just going for like the obvious universities that we all know that they are there and they have hard access criteria. Therefore, you have a higher rate of like having a more successful student. However, if you have a limited amount of money, there's a lot of creative ways to get access. So one is like those are the represented groups. The other one is like other universities that have top students, and you don't need to spend that much money.
Mm-hmm. And adding one thing just from underrepresented minorities in the U.S. So if you're located in the U.S., there's HBCUs, there's HSIs. And so those can be very overwhelming to navigate, but especially if you have a small budget. But I think, again, where you could utilize that money is really giving back to a student organization. And that's where we saw a lot of impact. So to partner up with a very specific, there's so many student organizations out there in any university. And when you pair up with a student organization and you give back skills. So for instance, with specific HBCUs, we were giving back specific mentoring skills, interview skills, other, professional development. It was a really great relationship. And again, it doesn't have to cost, the world. So again, just being intentional about it when it comes to diversity as well.
Yeah, that's great. Really, really interesting examples there. I mean, I think I asked yesterday about this, are there any good partners that you can use? So maybe not going directly to the universities, but are there any good vendors out there that help with these kind of things? If you're thinking about spending some money, maybe you've got a 50K budget, would you spend it with a partner or vendor?
I think we talked about yesterday, I've utilized two in the past, which was Handshake and Way Up. Mm-hmm. Again, depending on your budget, you need to be very cognizant to not utilize and just lean all into that partner as the answer. Because I do want to be honest, like you're going to still have to do the work. You're still going to have to show up as the relationship builder and the expert. So what I would suggest is utilize partners that are going to add value to a few different ways. So maybe they're going to help you connect more virtually with a lot of different campuses. That's one. Maybe they're going to provide some specific data that is actually going to render some really good just guidance for you when it comes to, the student demographics. I think that's always helpful. And then 3, it's also, are they going to be a good partner in sharing out your jobs and getting those internships out there? I think that's a really great way to use those 2 platforms. But again, not to lean on a partnership for the end all be all, because you still have to do a lot of the work.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I used Handshake in the past. However, like also like one of the points that you made there, it depends on your resources and your budget, because usually campus recruiting, when you're starting, you don't have any resource, and if you try to get a deal with Handshake and try to sell to your head of talent or to your head of people or to the business, that is like, hey, I'm gonna hire 20 interns, but for that I need 100K to close the deal with the Handshake, is going to be a no-go. So we usually leave out of like the backlog of everything that we use as an ATS for full-time hiring, and we need to be creative with that. So when you think about adding a tool, I think you need to think at a scale. So those tools work really well for those companies that are hiring hundreds and thousands of interns and early career talent every year, because they have a big workforce. For a new started, like I would focus on building those relationships, use that money like smartly to provide training, to do like some specific small tools around like your current ATS, more than like going out there and like trying to close the deals, because they are not going to solve the problem. They are actually going to give you more trouble, because you need almost one headcount, one person managing that platform. You need to upload your job description. You need to like do the meetups in there. You need to like keep it clean, make sure that you close things up, you update it all the time, put it in brand. And guess what? No one is going to help you. Like when you are working on campus, like you are like a small head of talent for your little like early careers team. So you do a little bit of HR, you do a little bit of compensation, you do a little bit of like hiring, you do program management, and you also do tooling. So you do a little bit of recruiting operations. So when you're out there and then you ask the rec ops, hey, can you give me a bit of like more of your technical people to implement this Handshake into my ATS? They're going to say, we don't have resources, be back in the line, you're last of our priorities. So that's why it needs to be really purposeful of what you get and how you get it, because you need a lot of dedication to maintain those tools. So similar to what Britt said there.
Mm-hmm. And I want to highlight one thing Sebastian said, because it's so true about early careers. I've never done so many different things across the board. Like you said, a program manager, you're involved with compensation at a different level. You're leading events. So you're an event planner, but then you're also doing the recruiting, but then you're also it's a wild ride. So if you haven't gotten involved, it's worthwhile, but you bring up a good point that you're often in a lot of different directions. So kind of coming back to that purpose is going to be helpful for you.
And my understanding as well is it's quite sort of cyclical throughout the year as well. So absolute crunch periods of craziness, and then maybe slight lulls and things like that. But what do you tend to do during the periods that aren't crunch? How do you prepare for the crunch periods when you're not in them?
Yeah, I still think there's a lot of work, because it's leading up to, so if you think about the crunch period, it's this intense campus recruitment period, which in the US is the fall. It's that kind of September to November period. Crazy intense, right? Because it's all the students, everyone's rushing to get these internships or gain experience. And so you have a lot of programs stacked on top of each other in recruitment. So leading up to that, what I suggest is be planning way in advance for how to create a really good process, even if you don't have a big budget. Like, how do you create such a clear process that when it comes time to open up those internships, it's not confusing or ambiguous? So very clear. Also have, again, a process in place when it comes to the interviewing and assessment. You do not want to be kind of trying to figure this out at the time and say, how are we interviewing? So during that lead up, I would encourage you to think about the assessment, see what you can automate as part of the interview process, especially scheduling, any way you can get ahead of that. And then additionally, the third thing I would say is be prepared to start planning any type of these events. So in the campus recruitment world, we know you're going a lot on site, especially now kind of post-COVID era. Or are you planning a virtual hackathon? Are you planning virtual speaking events? These you cannot wait to do until September. You have to be planning them prior to. So I would say you really don't get time to just sit around. That's the planning part. And then the execution is stacked up in that fall period.
Yeah. I mean, I think it touched on a really good question, I think, is, so say it's January now, and say, you're a TA leader, we're going to approach campus recruitment for the first time this year, and you want to get involved in the sort of milk round events that are coming up in September. Have you got enough time now to get involved in it? Or when would you need to start, to maybe if you were doing a small scale program?
Yeah, you need to start as early as possible, because this is what you need to start doing. You need to start with actually the business goals, and then understand what does the business need next year, so that I can start planning and connecting with the universities before June. Because don't forget, once June is, the universities are out. So they're not as responsive. So what you need to make sure is between this time and spring to actually kind of get everything in order of what you're planning for the fall, because otherwise, again, it's going to be very quiet over the summer. So I would say align with your business. Absolutely. Like, what are their goals? What interns do they need? What kind of programs? And then that way you can know to strategize, what does your fall look like? Because you can't just replicate every year after year. You are going to have to make some changes based on the business needs.
Yeah,
so it's more similar in Europe as well, or
for us it's a little bit of a crazy world. So like I work a lot with calendars, and those interested, like I'm happy to connect in LinkedIn as well to like share my calendar. For me, it was really important that that seasonality factor, like what I'm doing in each of the quarters and what my team is doing in each of the quarters is crucial, because each of the seasons, let's say, you need to follow the academic year, so similar to what Brittany said, and then change your hat. So in one season, so for us in Europe, like depending on the country, changes a lot. And when managing Europe and Latin America is completely two different worlds. But to simplify, we do winter and summer, more or less, where you have to set up of start dates, potential start dates on 3 to 6 months internship programs. You need to work 1 year in advance to secure budget. Usually, depending on like how mature your business is, some of this budget can come from your attrition rates. So one way to like sell the program is like, hey, you don't know if you can give me this amount headcount to have an internship program that will convert into a full-time. But if you are having a 20% attrition rate, that is really high, but imagine it's 20%, let's hire around like that 20% on interns. So we know that there's going to be a gap. So that is 1 year before. Now you start the year and you need to make sure that like you do that tour. So either you do it online, as Brittany said, or like you do in person. So that is quite heavy. So I call that like Sebas on tour. Like I might stay like 1 or 2 months outside of home, just traveling to different universities, targeting different people, going to like more like country wide events. And then you start the hiring process, right? And depending on the university or the location, there are ones that are really crucial to make it on the day, right? For instance, like India, if you go to India and you hire there, to lock a spot is super important, because the first spot takes it all. And for that, you need to pay and this is a extreme example, because you need to like kind of like pay the organization and also like show your progress and your company standards for the university to get the first spot. Now the first spot takes to interview every single student that they want, and they make an offer on the spot. So the second company interviewing the same people, they already lost the amount of people that you already offer, and that is a complete fight. So it's like non-sleeping, being there in the university and get on the first spot. So this is why it's really seasonality. It depends by country, and you really need to make sure that like you are ready to wear different hats depending on like what the business is required or what the academic year is required from you. So it's quite fun, but it just like takes a lot from you. And one thing that I want to finish off with is this is a great opportunity to sell to your head of talent. Sometimes in high-growing companies, like you have ups and downs depending on the economics, waiting for the fundings. We stop hiring. Now we do a little bit of redundancies. Now we press the accelerator and you need to hire 2x. So on all those ups and downs, you can sell that you can take some of those resources that Brittany was saying, like we are fulfilled at the beginning with full-time recruiters that want to do something else, or coordinators that want to like help out some other projects. Take that opportunity to put it on board, because they're paying for that headcount. So like just utilize that headcount for people that are hungry, that they want to like get something else out of their jobs. Bring them on board in those low seasons to like help you out with some of your hats. So it can be really good for program management. It can be good for public speaking and doing events, anything, right? Like, so that is a little bit of like the good part of kicking off something in early careers.
Awesome. Right. So I've got to just finish up now with Brittany, you touched on it about assessing people. I hate broad stereotype, sort of broad sweeping statements, but obviously we're looking at Gen Z as a kind of generation at the moment in terms of campus recruiting, early careers. You know, how do we make sure that we get the right people for these roles? Are there any differences between sort of this Gen Z kind of generation and maybe the generation before? You know, does working from home, has that had any effect on our ability to assess people, or has it changed who we need in an organization? Any thoughts on this topic?
So a few things here that I'm hearing. So you touched on assessment and then kind of the world we're in now. So I think just to highlight, the most important thing is we do have to be cognizant that yes, during the years 2020, 2022, those were really critical times that students were not in person. And what this did, it did change the dynamic of communication, of the way students show up. Now, it doesn't mean that every student is lacking in this space. Now, some might be more comfortable reading off screens now, which definitely drives me a bit crazy when students have notes reading in an interview. Or there's opposite. Some students are very comfortable in a virtual setting and do wonderful. So I would say, in order to assess talent nowadays, I do think it's important to understand that all students are not coming with a ton of experience. And so how do you assess potential? One of the best ways to do that is really kind of to put in place a live project or some type of presentation where you can assess a student based on their potential. How do they think under pressure? How do they critically come up with a solution to a challenging business problem? And it can be very general. And how do they maybe work together? So I would say, as this part of your assessment, it is essential to interview differently now than maybe you once did, which was, I don't know if everyone was bringing everyone in one-on-one, but I think it's a very different world now, and it is much more collaborative, entrepreneurial. I know, Sebastian, you talked about that earlier, is like, how do we assess the entrepreneur in these students? And in order to do that, I would definitely suggest some type of work project test during that interview and ask questions around that versus questions around about their background specifically, because they might not have those examples. And to me, that really isn't unfair, and you're not able to assess a student in that way just because they didn't have XYZ experience. It doesn't mean they can't do the job.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. I think like potential is key. Adaptability is something that you mentioned yesterday, Brittany, and it's also like super important to be adaptable, like think outside of like certainty. It's really cool. And I think one of the only points that I want to make here, don't fall into the make it simple and say we're gonna put junior interviews to assess interns because they're just new and like you can assess because you are just like a lower level. That is a mistake. The most difficult interviews are to interview interns. Why? Because it's really hard to find potential. It's really hard to like interview for that entrepreneurship mindset. It's really hard to like interview for adaptability. It's really important that you select top senior seasoned interviewers that can assess that. And that is key for them to be successful in a company and for them to be kind of like the support and the kind of like the fans of these interns is to have senior people having interviewed them and have seen that potential in them. So that is an important point that I wanted to make.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've definitely been in party to running processes that have junior interviews for this level of hiring, and I think that I can exactly see why it's a mistake, because it is so difficult to interview any roles really that aren't like very, very tangible, and especially if people don't have loads of work experience, it's super tricky. Kind of question, just like an interested question. Certainly one of the conversations that I've had here about hiring at this level is when we're hybrid / remote as a company, is how we might first of all actually assess people remotely, but also how we might develop them remotely. Are you seeing companies or companies that you work for or other companies that you know hiring people remotely for remote roles at this level, or is it mostly sort of on an RTO basis?
I mean, I could talk about, so where I'm currently at, we are a fully remote company. We hire fully remote. We do everything fully remote. So, it is a unique place because we're maybe not necessarily bringing all the interns and early careers together. So I definitely think it can be a bit more challenging in the sense of that camaraderie, that network that typically interns might find at an on-site location. So it's something to be aware of. If you're a fully remote company, how do you create that connection, not only with the interns and the team, but then also the other interns? Because I think that is really valuable. If you want a good internship program and you want students to be excited about it and come do their best work, you do have to give back and give them that network is key. And I know there's a lot of research that has talked about that. So I guess just an important call out if you are running a fully remote program or, developing your talent that way.
Yeah, I think, at Uber, like we had to go remote. It was COVID, so there was no other solution. And what we did is like double down on the university, like the program experience people, like they checked in a lot with them and with their managers to make sure that they were a bit more handhold than anything that we've seen before, because they need that support. They need to be listened. They need to make sure that, that the manager is also not getting frustrated with extra time on camera or extra time like meeting these people that are not just like next to them in the desk and like telling them like what to do and how to do, etc. So we double down on that, and we try to embed ourselves also like from the program standpoint. As Brittany said, like networking for them is really important, that they are part of a community, that they are a student community. So making them part of that. So like almost on a weekly basis, do an activity in which like they are all involved remotely in camera, and really try to ask that for them in a compulsory way more than anything else, to make sure that they are connected and they are switched on. The moment that the intern is getting bored, done. They know that they're going to leave. They see already the end date of the internship. This is not going to be a valuable experience for anyone. But now, like the moment that like we were able to bring them to office, we don't hire anyone that is remote. We try to like bring them all next to their mentor or manager in office.
Well, awesome. Well, that was fantastic. That was so good. And I really learned even more stuff on this webinar. So thank you so much, both of you. Right, so that's the end of the first webinar for 2024. If you want to catch up with any of the webinars that happened last year, I think there were 27. You can go to youtube.com/@hirehq, and they're all there alongside all of the Hiring on All Cylinders podcasts as well. I will try and get this one up in the next day or so. You can also catch a rerun of this if you joined late on LinkedIn Live, so you can just rewatch it again on LinkedIn. So just go say thank you so much, Britt. Thanks, Sebastian. Thank you all for coming. And hopefully we'll see you soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us. Bye.